Paparazzi Papa. I know it has been a long time coming, over a year and a half, but honey, I have been seeing your comments, and what did I tell you on a live 7 days ago? Here's the Barbara Hutton video. You've been saying you would do it. I know paparazzi. I know paparazzi. I got one more video and then I'm gonna do Barbara Hutton. If I don't do it after this next video, you can cuss me out. I'll give you that right. Baby, you ain't finna curse me out because I have been too good to y'all. So without further ado, here is your poor little rich girl, Miss Barbara Hutton. Let's get to it. I'm not sure what's true or false in this video. I take gossip and tea and scandal from online, from books, from magazine, from word of mouth, and I ball it all up and I tell you guys a story. The whole video is for entertainment purposes. I have done my research. Make sure you do yours. Now, let's get to the video. Barbara Woolworth Hutton was born on November the 14th, 1912 in New York City, New York. She was the daughter to the heiress of the Woolworth fortune, Edna Woolworth, and her father's name was Franklin Laws Hutton. And outside of Barbara, the Huttons had no more children, which was probably due to Franklin, Barbara's father, pooking every other woman in the city instead of his wife. I mean, my goodness, the man was a drunkard and a known philanderer, honey. But of course, women of high society are supposed to be born into that life. Your father was a cheater. Your uncles were all cheaters. So high society women were meant to expect, accept, and understand their husband's cheating. But every once in a while, there is a unicorn born in these circles. And Barbara's mother, Edna, she was a unicorn. She didn't expect her husband to cheat. She wouldn't accept it, and she couldn't understand it. So her heart just stays broken constantly. Edna stayed depressed. And one morning, little Barbara, who was only around 4 years old at this time, rushes to her mother Edna's bedside to try to wake her up. But no matter how much she pushes and shoves, Edna doesn't rise. And it's only when Barbara gets frustrated at trying to wake her mother up that any alarm is raised. And when the help rushes in to see what's going on, they discover that Edna is not sleeping, she's dead. Now, the official cause of death was listed as mastoiditis, and that's basically a middle ear infection that seeps into the mastoid bone. But the high-class streets were talking, baby, and they were saying that Edna took herself off of the planet using poison because she just could not stand thinking of living the rest of her life with her husband always drunk and unfaithful. This episode right here was the very first and earliest traumatic experience that little Barbara ever had in her life, but sadly it would not be the last, because even after her mother Edna's death, Barbara had to sit back and watch her father immediately continue to sleep with other women. And it was only after Franklin started to feel a little bit guilty about his daughter seeing him do all of this, and also guilty about the lack of time he spent with her, that he kind of shuffled her away to go live with family members. And some of those family members also didn't have time or patience to raise Barbara. So she was also sent off to several boarding schools. Then when she got to the boarding schools, the other children would pick on her. Her mother had passed away, and her father wouldn't even have much to do with her. So this made Barbara a freak in the other children's eyes. She was just so different from their existence. So they called her names, they left her out of their little games, and it pained Barbara even more when she would see her bullies receive visitors at the school, and she would receive nobody. Even when Christmas came around and the other little girls would pack up all of their bags and they would go and spend at least a week or 2 weeks with their families, Barbara would be left with the head mistress at the boarding school. And it wasn't until she got close to her teenage years that an aunt and uncle took a special interest in her, and sometimes they would pick her up or they would visit her for Christmas. In fact, per the story, this aunt and uncle had Barbara come and live with them for a little while at their new home, Mar-a-Lago. And yes, this is the same Mar-a-Lago or Mar-a-Lago that Donald Trump currently owns. And if Barbara could have stayed living with her aunt and uncle for a long period of time, she probably would have had a bit of stability. But by the time she became 15 years old, somebody made her aware of the vast fortune that she had. Turns out her maternal grandmother, who was the Mrs. Woolworth, had left Barbara a big inheritance. And baby, some people claim that this inheritance got up to what we know today as $1 billion. So this child at 15 allegedly has access to this type of money. Baby, the folks say that that girl moved right out of the house with any of her family members and got herself an upscale apartment in New York. And of course, this was a horrible decision but without her father truly paying any attention to her, Barbara was just kind of winging it. She was going into adulthood very early on because by this time her father had gotten remarried. And the only thing him and his new wife were worried about was not upsetting Barbara so they could continue to have access to her money. So Barbara started to make all of her decisions, and her decisions were decisions a 15-year-old would make. She would go on wild week-long shopping sprees, and there was this one week when she went alongside a cousin and she spent $98,000. And you talking about catching some people's attention. All them folks that worked at some of the places that she shopped at, or even the people who were standing out on the streets of New York who would see her leaving with all of these bags and boxes. Oh baby, they were angry. And I have no doubt in my mind that at least one of those people that were standing on the side of the street had the audacity to go inside the store and demand for the store teller to tell them just how much did this little Hutton girl spend for all of that stuff. And I can't say for a fact that that's how it happened, but I can say for a fact that it definitely got around that this girl had spent $98,000 in a week. And so you started to get people complaining. It's alleged one day when Barbara was being chauffeured around town that this elderly man pointed out her car and yelled out, "That's that spoiled, rotten little Barbara Hutton bitch. She spent $100,000 in 1 week while we poor regular folks work ourselves to the bones for just $2 a week. Let's get her, everybody, let's get her." And so everybody started to run and try to mob Barbara's car. And if it wasn't for her driver putting the pedal to the metal, there's no telling what would have happened to Barbara. So here we go, the beginning of the negative view that the public is starting to form of Barbara. But she is too young and out of touch to notice it. She simply feels like these people just hate her just to hate her, and that the money she was spending was her money. She didn't understand that it looked vulgar or crass or even obscene to throw around large amounts of money in front of people who basically had nothing. And you can forgive Barbara of this because she's only 15, so she gets a pass. It was her skippy-head daddy that should have known better. It was the event he did that would tarnish Barbara's name for the rest of her life. So to tell you about it, I don't know if Franklin Hutton felt guilty because he had basically abandoned Barbara all of her life, or maybe he just wanted to show that his daughter was the wealthiest girl in all of high society. All I know is that for Barbara's 18th birthday, this man thought it would be a good idea to throw a debutante party that cost $60,000. And if that don't sound bad enough for you, let me add this. Through a party that cost $60,000 while the rest of the nation were in the throes of the Depression. You had men and women taking themselves off of the planet every day because they couldn't provide for their children. People are starving, and you throwing a party for one night now? $60,000? And yes, if you know anything about high society, you would know that plenty of these girls had these debutante parties, but none of their families thus far had spent no $60,000. And Franklin was absolutely tone deaf because he should have known that an event this big during the Great Depression was going to attract the media, and that's exactly what it did. And honey child, when the public saw pictures of Barbara and all of her finery, when they read the price list of the hired entertainment, the food, the venue, the decoration, they became sick to their stomachs and they became full of rage. They running around here looking like chimney sweepers and got their stomach touching their backbone, and these people have spent that amount of money for one night. All I can say is it was a scandalous thing, child. And even though she hadn't planned one detail of this party, it was Barbara who got all of the heat from it. People could not stand her. And it was from this moment on that Barbara would be watched like a hawk all the way through her life. Any move she made would be in the papers, and she was constantly criticized, which was horrible for Barbara because, Lord have mercy, the girl made horrible decisions like her first husband. ALEXIS MDIVANI, the broke prince from Georgia. Alexis was a part of the marrying MDIVANIs, a group of siblings with royal blood but with no royal money. But guess what? They didn't need any royal money because the whole family was blessed with good looks and charm. So they cut a line through the social register, marrying whomever fell for their spell. And I know y'all be looking at Ari Fletcher, Lyra Galore, and some of these other rappers' girlfriends or video girls. Y'all look at them like, oh, you know, they know how to choose a man with money. Baby, they gonna get some money. Child, the MDIVANI siblings would have Ari and Lyra out here looking like school children with the tricks they used to pull. So the story says that Barbara was invited to a polo match, and Alexis was one of the players in the match. And before Barbara got there, he was playing all normal, wasn't really making any goals. And somebody whispered in his ear that Barbara, who was the richest girl in the world by this point, so they whispered in his ear that Barbara was there. Alexis got the giddy up and on that doggone horse, knocking the ball in the goal every single time. And when his team won the match, he made a big show of taking off his shirt, swinging it around his head 3 times, and then carelessly throwing it in the audience. The shirt just ended up landing in Barbara's lap. Oops, how did that happen? God dang, MDIVANIs were good. That's how it happened. And Alexis was so good that by the time he threw the shirt in Barbara's lap, he had already known that she was locked in. Because the whole match, Barbara's eyes were on him. She even giggled and leaned over to her friend, whispering just how fine Alexis was. You know, she talked about his shoulders rippling through his shirt, his chest poking out. And by the time the shirt landed, oh baby, she was just about ready to faint with admiration. But soon Barbara was stunned to be reminded that Alexis was actually a married man. He'd already wifed up another wealthy young lady by the name of Louise Astor Van Allen. And if you guys keyed in on the name Astor, yes, she was a part of the wealthy Astor family, the same family of the wealthiest guy, John Jacob Astor, who went down on Titanic. So Barbara is actually at this game irritated that Alexis, this guy that she is extremely attracted to, is married. But soon she decides, you know what? He's a married man. He's not available. Just forget him. But what she didn't understand is that as soon as Alexis found out that she possessed more wealth than his current wife, oh baby, he was going to make himself available. And this man did it in the most scandalous way ever. So rumor has it that even though Alexis is married, he and Barbara become fast friends. And we'll say over the course of maybe a year, he started to profess his love for Barbara. And Barbara, who is only around 19 or 20 years old, ends up falling for this. So she starts spending more and more time with Alexis, and of course, eventually they become intimate. And then one day, Alexis invites her to go to San Sebastian, or Sebastian, Spain. And at first, Barbara declines because it's not just her and Alexis going, his whole family is going, along with a bunch of friends, some of her family's associates, people they know. But then Alexis tells her that's the whole point. With everybody there at the events in Spain, nobody's going to suspect a thing. And they have a private cottage on the island that they're going to that nobody knows about. So they could just meet there. And so Barbara gives it a little bit of thought. And next thing you know, she is on the plane headed to Spain. When she gets there, she sees Alexis in passing with his family. And then when he finally gets some time alone, he tells her where the cottage is and to meet him at that private cottage. When he and Barbara meet up, the folks say Alexis is in there tearing it up. Barbara is in there seductively screaming. You know, she's closing her eyes. And when she opened them back up, baby, she wanted to sink into the bed because not only was Alexis's wife in the bedroom looking at them, so was the wife's other family members and many of their shared friends. Barbara hopped out the bed, got all of her clothes on, and she took off running. She ran straight past her hotel room to the airport and boarded a plane headed for Paris. And it's there that she took cover from the embarrassment, just hoping and praying that everything that just happened was a dream. But woo child, wasn't no dream to be found. And get this, y'all, the whole thing was planned from the very beginning. As soon as Alexis talked Barbara into going to Spain, he and his partner in crime planned out how he would get Barbara into the cottage and start making love to her, while his friend or sister gathered a group of family and friends and told them, hey guys, let's show you around the island. They have this beautiful private cottage. Let's go see it. And if you're asking why this was planned, it was because because Alexis wanted to ensure a divorce from his wife and a marriage to Barbara. Because yes, cheating was expected and accepted of women of high society, but not when the man just played right in your face. Not when he brought it where you could just walk in on him sleeping with another woman. And as for Barbara, if she didn't want to be known as a whore strumpet, then baby, she was gonna have to marry that man. But gossip claims she actually hesitated. But Alexis's sister called her and told her, "You better marry my brother. You think you're embarrassed now that all of high society know that you slept with him? Just imagine how you will feel when I tell the general public. You know they already basically don't like you." And so Barbara had unwittingly trapped herself into a marriage with Alexis, which happened in the year of 1933. And Alexis treated Barbara like trash. The folks say on their wedding night, Barbara, who I guess was just trying to make the best of the situation, was getting ready to go to bed with her husband. Baby said Alexis walked in and told her, "Oh, you so fat. I mean, my goodness, you're just so unattractive. You can't expect me to make love to somebody that looks like you. I mean, I can't. I won't." And after this, what y'all think happened to Barbara's hair while she was sitting on that bed? I'm not even gonna say it. Type it in the comment. What I am going to say is that allegedly Alexis talked to her like a dog that night, and gossip claims that he didn't make love to her that night. And you would think after saying all of this that he never made love to her again. But that's the thing. He was a narcissist that broke women down just to build them back up. So after this cruel marital night, by the next night, Alexis was probably on his hands and knees kissing Barbara's hands, telling her how beautiful she was. So this young lady, whose mental health has already been messed up since she was 4 years old and found her mother deceased, is now being messed up even more mentally. And worse than that, Alexis is messing up her money as well. I mean, blowing millions on horses, cars, jewelry, said that he was buying his side pieces, $100,000 homes. It was an absolute mess. And while Barbara was sitting and watching her life become a living nightmare, she sought love from somewhere. And she thought she would find it in a man named Kurt von Hohen's Reventlow, which is a man that she'd spotted at a dinner party in the year of 1935. As soon as Barbara saw him, she started telling her friends that this man right here looked like he could be the one to save her, to treat her like a real woman. And because Barbara was already falling for another man, it really didn't hurt her too much when her husband Alexis filed for a divorce, which also happened in 1935. In fact, Barbara was so caught up on trying to get with Kurt that she didn't blink an eye when Alexis demanded and received $2 million from the divorce settlement. It didn't matter to Barbara. She was already moving on to Kurt. And actually, they got married in the year 1935, probably just a couple of months after she divorced Alexis. And immediately, husband number 2 started to show signs that he also probably wasn't the best man for Barbara, because they were only married for a few weeks when he started complaining about living in America. Because in America, everybody only saw him as a rich wife's husband. They didn't truly see him as a man. And so he starts to sulk. You know, he's never happy. He's always angry, always looking sad. And after a long period of this behavior, Barbara finally asks him, "Okay, Kurt, you know, what will make you happy? I just want to see you smile." And he tells her that the only thing that will make him happy is if they move out of the country and go to Denmark. But that wasn't all. He also wanted Barbara to give up her American citizenship and become a citizen of Denmark. And so Barbara, who never thought about the consequences of her decision, made the tone-deaf decision to give up her American citizenship. And she was instantly slaughtered by the American people, who were much more patriotic back then than we are today. They'd already been talking about Barbara like a dog for her first marriage to Alexis. And now, after Alexis had left her $2 million poorer, she's sitting up here letting her second husband dictate her citizenship. They also felt like, so B, you can sit up here and get your fortune in America, have American dollars in your bank account, but then when it comes to living in America, you too good for that? It was a terrible decision to make, and the negative press tarnished her image immensely. Barbara went into a very deep depression, but then there was one thing that happened that helped to ease her mind, and that is she became pregnant and gave birth to her son, Lance, in the year 1936. And Lance was his mother and his father's pride and joy, but sadly, there was no pride and joy left between the couple itself, because soon after his son was born, Count Kurt became a true monster. And Barbara couldn't make a move without getting bust all upside her head, child. Kurt would fling Barbara from here to there. He would take all of his frustrations out on her. Gossip claims one night the abuse was so bad, she ended up bloodied and in the hospital, and Kurt ended up in jail. Barbara became so stressed and so fearful that she ended up taking drugs and alcohol just to cope with her situation. She finally filed for divorce in 1938, but even then Kurt tried to make her life hell by taking their son Lance with him. But thankfully the court sided with Barbara and she was able to maintain custody of her son. Even having her son in her arms wasn't enough for Barbara. The kind of love that she wanted could only come from a husband. She also felt like the third time is the charm. And she, along with several other people, thought for a minute there that that charm was going to be Howard Hughes. You see, by 1937, they had taken a huge interest in each other, even though Howard was engaged to Katharine Hepburn. That didn't matter to Barbara, honey. She had already stolen one husband, so what was it to steal one more? But girl, Barbara got that man into the bedroom and everything changed because he could not make her climax. Barbara would tell several people later on that Howard Hughes was a terrible lover. And it was mostly because when she didn't climax, when he thought she should climax, or when he felt was an appropriate time for her to climax, he would just stop the session altogether. So Barbara cut that little Howard Hughes mess short quick and instead married another wealthy and famous American man, Cary Grant. She and Cary married in 1942, and most people feel like this truly was the man for Barbara. You see, Cary Grant could actually see that most of Barbara's so-called friends were actually leeches, and so he would not only tell Barbara that she needed to get rid of her friends and get new friends, he also would rarely, if ever, escort her to her famous dinner parties. You know, he just didn't want to be bothered with them. He felt like it was all fake. He just didn't like it. So that's a problem. But the biggest problem in their marriage was the fact that Cary Grant had his own money. And at first, Barbara probably thought this was going to be a great thing. You know what I'm saying? Oh my goodness, I am finally marrying a really wealthy man. You know, he's not marrying me for my money. I won't have to pay for anything. But soon it got on her nerves because the only way for Cary Grant to keep making his own money was for him to go to work, for him to continue to act. And this meant that he couldn't be up under Barbara 24/7, which is what she expected. And so she deals with it for a little while, but the whole time she is just irritated, you know? And then finally she explodes one day and she tells him, you know, give up your job. You know, it's a silly thing. Acting is silly anyway. Just give it up. I have more than enough money to take care of both of us. What do you need to work for? And she thought she explained her position well, but this didn't do anything but upset Cary Grant. Acting was his job. He was good at it. He loved acting. How dare you call his stuff silly and ask him to give it up? So this only pushed him further into his work and to take on more projects. And Barbara, who was used to getting what she wanted, just couldn't handle the fact that Cary just wasn't going to give up his career for her. And so suddenly he wasn't so handsome and she really wasn't so in love anymore. So she ended up going behind Cary Grant's back and meeting up with famous fashion designer Oleg Cassini. And Barbara tells Oleg something like, Oleg, I've been watching you and I'm in love with you. I want to marry you. And Oleg is sitting up there looking like, Barbara, I'm married. You know I'm married to Gene Tierney. What are you doing? And Barbara responds, oh, her. You know, what does it matter? Get rid of her. Come marry me. And Oleg is like, I'm not going to leave my wife. I'm happily married. I love my wife. And Barbara says, oh, so you won't just leave her then? Well, do you think she really loves you? In fact, we'll see how much she loves you. Go tell your wife, Jean, I'll give her $1 million, like right now, today, if she leaves you, if she gives you to me. I bet that's an offer she can't refuse. And so Oleg Cassini, who really couldn't believe this incredulous offer, was kind of looking at Barbara like she was crazy. But I guess he got to thinking about it, and he probably became kind of curious himself, just wondering what kind of decision his wife Jean would make. So allegedly, he asked Jean. And baby, I don't know, but I can pretty much guess that Jean cursed out everybody in the whole vicinity, because gossip claims that the answer was no. She didn't want no $1 million, and how dare Barbara try to buy her husband from her. Talk about a hot mess. I know Jean Tierney was like, girl, go find your own man. So because Barbara wasn't able to set Oleg up as the immediate next guy that she could run to, when she ended up divorcing Cary Grant in 1945, she moved away from America to a place called Tangier. When she got there, she bought a palace and set about meeting other wealthy people so she could make new friends and new connections. We already know those connections included another man, and this one was another prince with a speck of royal blood. IGOR Troubetzkoy. I hope I said that right. But between the time Barbara had divorced Cary Grant and met and married IGOR, that was at least 3 years. And this was the longest time during Barbara's dating and her marriage history that she had been single, which I'm supposing was enough time to comb her little tail down, to not be so demanding and wanting her husband to give up his career and be up under her 24/7. And I say this because Prince IGOR was said to be a race car driver, and he was said to be away from home a lot. And another reason that Barbara probably settled to let this man keep his career and time away from her is because he was sweet to her. He was very nice to her. But sadly, although I think IGOR loved Barbara at first, I think very quickly he found her to be a very boring woman. You know, she didn't do anything. She was just a very rich lady who sat on her behind and drank tea or coffee all day. You know, she hadn't had any experiences in anything. She had kind of just been shut in and taken care of for her whole life. She'd never done any work. And so I think IGOR was just kind of looking for a woman with just a little bit more spice, you know, a woman that was just a little bit more interesting and would probably have something to talk about outside of clothes and guest lists at certain events. So sadly, IGOR filed for a divorce from Barbara in 1951, and gossip claims that Barbara took this divorce very hard. This was her 4th marriage to end in divorce, and this time she had even allowed herself to be very lenient with her husband. She let him keep his job. She let him keep his distance. Gossip claims she even heard that when he was away from her, he had a woman or two, and she didn't even complain about that, and yet and still this man divorced her. So Barbara started to feel broken, like something was wrong with her. And the newspapers were even more harsh. You know, allegedly they started calling her poor little rich girl. And just like society does today with beautiful or wealthy women who can't keep a husband or a man, like for instance, Halle Berry. Just like society today is always yapping saying, you know, something must be wrong with her. What is her problem? That's what they were doing to Barbara back then. And soon it became entirely too much. And so she attempted to take herself off of the planet. Thankfully, it didn't work. But really, Barbara was still killing herself slowly anyway, because she was delving deeper and deeper into drugs and alcohol. And I forgot to mention this a long time ago, Lord, I'm sorry. But remember when I told you her first husband called her fat on her wedding night? Well, this started Barbara on a severe diet. So you're not eating, you're on a bunch of drugs, you're on a bunch of alcohol. She was just messing up her body. And more than this, she was kind of starting to mess up her look. But she felt like all of this could be cured in an instant. All she needed to do was find another husband. And she found him in a man named Porfirio Rubirosa. And to be real, Barbara needed her tail whooped for this one. She really did. She needed her little skippy-headed tail whooped. Because Porfirio was a known playboy. This man had bedded more women than Wesley Pipes. And here's the thing, he was still active in his whore stage when he and Barbara met. So the fact that she decided to marry him in 1953 was really just silly, because as soon as the wedding was done, she found out that he was sleeping with Zsa Zsa Gabor. In fact, he was sleeping with Zsa Zsa so much they never consummated their marriage, because on their marriage night and every other night after that, he was going to see Zsa Zsa, who he had been sleeping with even before he met Barbara. And so Barbara divorced him after only 53 days together. 12 months later, she had another silly marriage that made the whole public side-eye her. And this is when she married her sixth husband, Gottfried von CRAMM, in 1955. And Gottfried was a German professional tennis player, and the reason people side-eyed this marriage is because Gottfried was gay. And I'm not talking about no in the closet only a few folks know. Baby, this man had been locked up for homosexual activity before. So of course, this is just tabloid and gossip fodder. You know, the public is really just wondering what the heck is wrong with Barbara Hutton? Why is she making these decisions? And when Barbara was confronted with this, even with some of her friends asking her what the heck was she thinking, Barbara allegedly told them that, you know, she know he's gay, but she doesn't think he's ever truly been with a woman who would put her all into changing him and making him like the opposite sex instead of the same sex. And she could be that woman. Also, she told her friends that she needed to be with Gottfried because he was the only one she felt had the power to cure her of her drug addiction. But child, that girl was sitting up there on more drugs than she ever was before, because turns out she couldn't cure Gottfried of his homosexuality, and she couldn't change him from liking the same sex. Since Barbara could not change her husband's mind into wanting her, this was another marital disaster, the sixth one, and it ended in 1959. And after this, Barbara stayed single for 5 years. But during this 5 years, she did nothing to get her mental or physical health back into better shape. As a matter of fact, gossip claims during this 5 years, she started to appear drunk in public. Sometimes she would also be so high, she would be slurring her words. It was almost like Barbara herself felt that she couldn't live a viable, stable life unless she had a husband. So in 1964, she tried marriage again. And this time it was to a pretty regular man by the name of Pierre Doan or Doan. And if you research him today, a lot of write-ups will refer to him as Prince Pierre Doan. But honey, the folks say that boy wasn't born no doggone prince. Barbara, who for some reason had become obsessed with marrying a man with a title like she did when she was younger, bought Pierre's princehood as well as some land for him to lord over in the province of Laos for $250,000. And after she bought his princedom or title, they concocted a story about how he was adopted by the royal family in Laos. And truly, Barbara could have kept Prince Pierre just being regular Pierre, because honey, that marriage didn't work out either. This was her seventh and final marriage, and it was over in the year 1966. Now, although Barbara had finally thrown in the towel on having a sacred and holy union, she still dated here and there, but every time either her or the man just lost interest very quickly. And so she mostly just spent the rest of her life sitting at home, having guests over when she felt like it, you know, going shopping. There were still rumors of her being drunk out in the middle of the street. But there was something good to be said about this time period too, because rumor has it that whenever she would go out in public and go shopping, she would always find somebody to give money to, whether it was a beggar on the streets or somebody just walking past her. You know, she was always giving gifts, always trying to help somebody. But the sad part about all of this, by the 1970s, her fortune had dwindled down bad. And it's sad to say, but it was mostly because after every single divorce, her husband would end up taking millions from her. And she really just couldn't catch a break. Rumor has it she started to go blind in her right eye. And this is probably why in 1971, as she was walking around her house, she ended up tripping and falling over the carpet. This fall actually broke her hip. But Barbara behaved very weirdly after this. Like, she did not go to the doctor as soon as she broke her hip. She lingered months at her house just chilling in her bed. So when she did finally go to the doctor, her bones had set in a way that even though the doctors operated and did what they could to fix everything, Barbara would have a shooting pain in her hip for the rest of her life. So she could not walk. And so from here on out, anytime anybody saw Barbara or when she had to leave out of the house, she would either be in a wheelchair or she would just hire these big, strong men to carry her around. Like, they would be actually carrying her inside of the store while she picked out what she wanted. They would carry her inside of restaurants. And of course, the newspapers were still following her every move. So the public, they just didn't really know what to make at this point. And then Barbara suffered another blow when her son Lance passed away in a plane crash in 1972. And he was only 36 years old. And it really was like she just could not catch a break no matter what. Negative things just continued to happen to her. Rumor has it that by the mid-1970s, when Barbara was in her early 60s, she ended up retiring from public life altogether. They say she moved away from her permanent home and moved into an upscale Beverly Hills hotel. And it was there that she continued to drink and drug herself away. And then she got hit with the final blow that she would ever receive. And that was the fact that the people that she had hired to keep a watch on her money, and not only that, to build her money back up since she was having money trouble, they ended up stealing from her. And I honestly feel like after this happened, Barbara really just felt like she didn't have anything else to look forward to. You know what I'm saying? I feel like she probably felt like, dang, if everything that keeps happening is just going to be bad, then what the heck am I doing? And so she continued on the path of not eating healthy or actually eating at all. She continued drinking. She continued her drugging. And then in May of 1979, she ended up passing away from a heart attack at only 66 years old. Gossip claims that when she passed, she only had about $3,600 in her bank account. This was a woman who had an amount rumored to be $1 billion at 15 years old or right around there. Now she's 66 with about $3,600 to her name. And her story is really just an absolute tragedy, but it also kind of opens people's eyes. You know, people are always wishing that they were more wealthy, they could take more trips, they didn't have to go out to work, they could just sit at home. But sometimes that life isn't all it's cracked up to be. And it certainly doesn't bring happiness. I mean, this woman had it all, and she still was searching for happiness, so much so that she married 7 times to find it and never found it once. So guys, just take that into consideration. But now this is the end of the old Hollywood scandal for Mrs. Barbara Hutton. Please guys, like the video if you like the video. If you are new here, please subscribe. If you've been sitting on the fence, please subscribe. And I will be back with another video soon. Bye.